Okay, so I'm gonna do my testimony video. I've done it a few times before for other people, in other groups and stuff, but honestly, I was thinking about it today, and I was like, how can I keep a testimony video even under like an hour because of all the amazing things that God has done for me in my life? I have so many numerous, multiple testimonies. Multiple. And so I was like, okay, well, we'll just start from the beginning. We'll start with the basics. And I'll give you a background of what life used to be like for me, how it drastically changed for me, and how that all went, how that all went down. And what has continued after the fact has been incredible growth, incredible growth. And all that glory, all the glory, all of it goes to God for it. I mean, I could tell you about my testimonies of being delivered and healed from mental illness. I used to be agoraphobic. I used to cut myself. I used to never leave my house. I couldn't go on an airplane. I couldn't go to the dentist. I couldn't go to the doctor. I couldn't travel without a Xanax, without some kind of medication. I have seen I don't know, but I want to say like a dozen different secular counselors from the time I was a preteen until I was about 30 years old. Seriously. And I don't, glory be to God, I don't take any medications now for anxiety. I don't take any medications for depression. I don't think in that same regard anymore. I mean, lately he's got me learning a lot about the brain, and there's some grace in that. There's parts of the brain that take a little bit longer to heal from trauma. So he's really got me focused on the brain right now and how it works. And it's just amazing. Anyways, that's a whole nother testimony in itself, the deliverance of from mental illness that we could totally talk about. I have testimony for a child under demonic oppression that's been healed and delivered recently. I could talk to you about, being in a marriage with an unbeliever and getting through not just one but multiple adulteries and infidelities, and what happens when you have to be the Hosea in that marriage, where you have the right to leave, but you really rely on God and you ask him if you can leave, and he says no, not just once but twice. And you just wait on him and you watch him restore things, and it's amazing. Anyways, I could talk about that testimony too, but like I said, how are we going to keep this video under even an hour? I don't even know, because I could sit here and the testimony is like your most important thing. I just think it's so amazing. And I think I know I've heard some people say, oh, my testimony isn't strong enough, or it's not as powerful. You don't know that. That testimony might be for one person, and that's good. Then it did its job, and that's what it was meant to do. And it's meant to give hope and to really be like, wow, to give encouragement, because if we can walk in that way and then we can give hope to others, that's what it's all about. So anyways, going on. I'm just going on because that's how good God has been. But let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about the testimony of my salvation. We'll go with that testimony. So when I was born into a Methodist family. So they were both believers. They were high school sweethearts. My mom had a bit of a lust problem a bit of an issue with trying to find men to fill that void of pain from her childhood and pain of her own marriage. So she kind of would stray. She would stray. And with that, my dad was hit with rejection as well from his childhood. And so that brought out all kinds of anger in him. And so he became very abusive, but very controlling of her and things that she was doing, or, trying to control her life. There was many altercations. I personally was not abused physically. However, I was, when my mom was about close to between 7 and 8 months pregnant with me, my dad did punch her intentionally quite hard in the stomach, hitting me. So I've gone through that trauma, and I've really processed it recently, actually, in counseling, and really realized that that's when rejection hit me, was from the womb, because the fetus, a child, an unborn child can feel much more than you even realize that they can feel. So because of that, I really felt not wanted from inside the womb. I knew that I wasn't wanted. I didn't feel worthy or wanted. So I kind of had attachment issues with caregivers from a very early age. My dad was alcoholic, abusive. I mean, he wasn't abusive all the time. He was mostly abusive, trying to control my mom, and then also abusive when he drank. So I remember there's one memory I have that I still have to kind of process over in Christian counseling that I'm going to, but we haven't gone through that one yet. But it was a memory that I have when I was about 3, and I'm hiding in the closet with my mom, and she's she's covering my mouth so I don't make a noise and things like that, and I can hear my dad. He's like belligerent in the living room, and I think the main issue was that he had a gun, and he had a loaded gun, and so my mom was worried and scared for us, and I do remember that. In all that pain and all that trauma, for my mom, she became more distant as a parent. So eventually my parents did divorce when I was about 4. They did get divorced, and my dad was only able to see me, I think, with visitations. I don't remember, but I wasn't able to go to him on weekends for quite. I just remember it not being right away, and I don't really remember why or what or anything, but that's okay. But it's like after the divorce, my mom checked out emotionally completely. In her own pain, yeah, it's one more. In her own pain, she checked out emotionally and put every man before me, every strange man before me. So we're talking like I don't remember seeing her often in my life. She would give me Benadryl, or even wine coolers as a small child, so I would fall asleep, and so that she could go meet up with guys. And I've forgiven her, and I'm still working through my forgiveness process, because, to be honest with you, I had no idea that I harbored so much pain towards my mom, because my mom was always the innocent bystander. She was always the victim, and so she kind of played that victim role, to where she just checked out emotionally and wasn't around much. In fact, she used to drop me off with my grandma quite often. My grandma was really my caretaker, but the only problem with that is my grandmother also has issues with abandonment, and she also didn't really know how to take care of me emotionally very well, or safely. I mean, I just remember, playing. She would burn garbage, and I just remember playing in the fire, and like there was absolutely no one to watch me. I mean, I know that was kind of the sign of the times too. Like I was, a child of the 80s, and so, back then we just kind of ran around, and no one I don't know. It just, the safety thing wasn't a big thing, but the problem is when safety is not a big deal to you for your kids, it puts them in a lot of danger. Bad things can happen to them, especially, if they're outside or not being watched, monitored when they're, not old enough. So ultimately, anyways, my mom, like I said, she just was very emotionally checked out, and my grandma took care of me, I guess the best way that she could, which was really just kind of letting me fend for myself. So I grew up a very, very independent child, a very independent child. Like my mom said, I would kind of take things on my own and do things my own way. I didn't have much for fear, although fear ruled my life. It's ruled my life, but it seemed like it didn't, because I became so much about self-preservation and taking care of myself, because I couldn't depend on my mom and my dad to take care of me, or my grandmother. So everyone that would keep me safe and and love me unconditionally, emotionally, they all left me. So I was very confused. I was a very emotionally traumatized child, person. So in that, I would like try to turn into things that I don't know, that were not right. I was a very spiritual child. Like, I remember just believing in the spiritual, supernatural side of things, even when I was like a tiny kid. Like, I remember hearing voices and stuff like that in my house. And I mean, I know it's all demonic now, but eventually it perverted my thinking into thinking that the paranormal, I started getting into the real paranormal stuff. And in fact, when I was like a preteen, yeah, when I was a preteen, I started getting into things like tarot cards. I started getting into the show. There used to be this show called Sightings that was on every Fridays, I think. Yeah, and it was all about ghost stories, right? So I used to watch that kind of stuff all the time. I was really, really hypersensitive and hyper into the supernatural realm of things. So anyway, but that, I mean, even though my mom was a believer, my dad was a believer, I only remember going to church like maybe for holidays. I mean, I don't remember seeing much example of prayer in my family. I don't remember hearing much of talk about how much God loves me, or anything like that, or about his word, except for through my grandmother. My grandmother, actually, even though in her own trauma and her own issues where she was, not emotionally available a lot of times, yet she was spiritually available, more so. So I praise God for putting certain people in my life in really traumatic times. Um, there's one time that I developed, one time, no, it's actually an accumulative thing. That's the thing about fear and anxiety and things like that. Things don't just happen one time and then you're just like completely just like in mental illness. It's a process that takes years. It takes years of neglect. It takes years of abandonment. It takes years of rejection. It takes years of self-rejection. Anyways, my point is my mom got remarried, and I had a baby brother around the time I was 10. And around that time, there was a bunch of changes that were going on in my life. I mean, my mom all of a sudden was getting married. She was having another child. I was used to being that only child for so long, for like 10 years of my life. So I was really confused. And one of the things I was really confused about was sex, in particular. In fact, I'm going to actually leave the room. I don't want my child to really hear about this, and it's nighttime, and he should be sleeping, really. But anyways, so it's kind of dark in here. So sex, in particular, was like a really bad thing for me, because I used to witness my mom having sex with a lot of multiple different men in my house when I was a small child, right after my dad left left us, or after he moved out of the house. But before the divorce, my mom was very promiscuous. And I witnessed a lot of those things, and I was really confused, and no one ever talked to me about what was happening. They just would get angry with me. So I didn't understand what was going on. So anyways, with that, whenever I would hear my mom and my stepdad having sex, I would cut myself. I would cut my, I didn't cut my arms though, because I didn't want people to, because I felt like cutting my arms was too obvious, I guess. I don't know. I would cut my thighs. So I would cut my thighs and just cry, and I was in so much torment. I didn't understand why I was in so much torment, but I figured there must be something wrong with me. I used to write in my journal some of the most sad and most angry things. I had a journal, and I used to writing about killing people. I used to write about how much I wanted to die. It was terrible. Absolutely terrible. And this was around the same time I started practicing into tarot cards and getting into like witchcraft and all of that. And around this time my health declined really quickly as well. But that's because of an incident that happened. So I got the stomach flu when I was third grade, 9, 10, around that time. So around the time of a bunch of change happening. My mom had just gotten remarried. We had moved. I was confused. I was going through a lot of confusion, and no one was talking to me ever. That's the thing I think, if I look back now, that I learned most too, is that it's okay to talk to your kids if you mess up. In fact, it's okay to say, hey, I messed up, and I will probably always mess up because I'm human, I'm flesh, you know what I mean? But God will never do that to you. God will never forsake you. I wish someone would have, looking hindsight, I wish someone would have explained something to me, explained what was going on to me, instead of just kind of pushing me away and ignoring my feelings, or getting angry with me for questioning feelings. So anyways, in this pain, I had that stomach flu, and I was by myself. I was by myself. I don't know where my mom was, and that's the thing. My mom could have been at work for all I know, and I still attributed it to her not being around ever in my life. And so I remember I got sick, and it wasn't a big deal, but then in the middle of the night I got sick, and my mom had left out a bag for me to get sick in, and I missed the bag. And I think the saddest part about this, and I hadn't realized how much it molded my entire life, and this phobia, my agoraphobia, my anxiety, but she never cleaned it up. In fact, I remember it drying up on the floor, and my grandmother was the one that actually cleaned it up days later when it was already drying. And but I also remember at that time that my grandmother had given me a Precious Moments Bible, and she had told me about the Lord's Prayer. It's like she knew, she knew. Well, it's like God knew, God's grace. That was God's grace, because I still hold that small seed in me, that He would send me somebody to like speak that life into me like that. But anyways, in that incident, that one incident, which it wasn't that one incident that led up to my vomiting phobia, but it's just the accumulation of everything. And then that incident that happened, I made a vow to myself without even realizing it that I would never throw up again. Like, I promised myself I would never throw up again, because I was alone, because no one helped me. And looking back on that now with my counselor, I would have wished that my mom would have cleaned it up. I wish she would have gotten me some water, laid with me even the rest of the night, but I was by myself. And so that event, just tore me up, and I didn't understand this phobia and this new fear and this anxiety, and I just felt this unworthiness. Like, I was just not worthy of being loved. I was not worthy of being cleaned up after or taken care of. And that's tough. And so I turned then to even deeper type of depression and anxiety, which turned me into, I had vowed to myself I was never going to throw up. So basically I became anorexic. I stopped eating completely because I was in my mind, I was like, well, if I don't eat anything, I won't throw up, and that will fulfill that vulnerability. That I'll never feel that vulnerable again, right? Right. Well, that's the silliest thing because, I mean, throwing up is a human experience. Like, you just don't not do it. I mean, you can try. I mean, I've done it before, obviously, because that's how desperate that situation is to me and has been in the past, because I've become agoraphobic and I stopped eating, I stopped traveling, I stopped doing anything that would possibly involve vomiting. But the root of it was just being unloved and being not fulfilled emotionally. Like, my needs weren't met emotionally. I was emotionally neglected so badly. And so that's where it stemmed from. And that's where it stemmed from. And that's where we're working right now. And that's where God is delivering me from right now in this current, we're still in that process. But I have come so far, guys. I've come so far. I'm going kind of all over the place, more so than I usually do. But it's important to include these tidbits that I haven't before. So anyways, just this bigger anxiety and this bigger depression and this bigger unworthiness turned me into seeking anything, and to make me feel important. And ultimately that led me to witchcraft, and the occult. And basically, first it started out me being in a paranormal group and kind of like being the lead psychic, they called him, because they found out that I had this gift. You have this gift with the paranormal, and you know things. And so I became part of that group, and then I started really, really delving into it with more new age type of thing, with new age type witchcraft, where we would meet up every week and we would do we would do the guided meditations. We would pray to the Great White Brotherhood. And I mean, if you look into the Great White Brotherhood, that's like straight up Illuminati stuff. Like, I had no idea, but we were saying these prayers to this Great White Brotherhood. Like, I don't know. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was so blind and just like trying to find any kind of a way to people to accept me and love me and whatever. Sometimes we'll do anything, and that's dangerous. And getting into the witchcraft is very dangerous, because trust me, even after you're saved, you have to go through a deliverance process, like a straight up deliverance process, because the demonic is real, because I've seen it. I know it. And because of that, I'm you know what? I'm really thankful for it, though, at the same time, because now I do have that experience, and I do know it. So I do know what it does, and I do know how it can take over your body, how it can destroy your body. But really, the main culprit that brings that in, it's not the root, though. I mean, the root, those are just familiar spirits. Those familiar spirits and things like that. Dangerous demonic stuff. But getting into it in the first place, I mean, that root is from fear. I mean, it stems in pride, because self-preservation is all about pride and preserving yourself rather than depending on God, because you've always had to depend on yourself, because you couldn't depend on your parents. So anyways, it's been such a ride. So I just got really caught up in that whole witchcraft thing, and I wasn't really, truly, to be honest with you, I wasn't seeking Jesus, and I wasn't seeking anything. I thought what I was doing was the right thing. It felt right. It felt like the right thing. I would go through like past life regressions and all those, and readings and meditations. I would work on doing readings on other people, and try to hone in on those gifts and stuff. And then something happened. And then this is around the time too, I want to say that I was around the same time when I was really deep into more witchcraft, new agey type of stuff, demonic, is when I really got into sensitive material again. I have to leave my child's room. So it was the time that I really got into during this couple years. It was just a couple years because I lost my job, and I had always been into modeling, and I was young. I was in my 20s, mid-20s, and mid to upper 20s, and so I started doing nude modeling at first, just artistic nude modeling, but then I found that didn't pay as well, and I didn't have a job, so then that progressed to Playboy style modeling, to full out just I guess you could call it porn. Yeah, porn. Not with other men, but it was more like the masturbation type of stuff. I did that kind of thing on camera, as well as fetish videos, like really weird fetish videos. And one of them, this one, I got into some deep, some really, really nasty, deep, gross type of fetish because it paid really well. And unfortunately, I think to these days, just when you think about pedophiles and stuff like that, we're talking about the deep state and stuff like that. We're talking about that kind of pornography. I did some pornography, some fetish videos of death fetish. So I would ultimately lie there dead, and my husband or whatever would, because he got involved in this pornography because it was the only way I was comfortable working with any men, and he was okay with it too because we got married. When we got married, we both were not believers. He is still not a believer, but I came to Christ 6 years into our marriage. Anyways, regardless of that, we were both kind of okay. As long as we were both together, we were okay with doing this type of pornography together. So I used to, and they would never do video of his face. It was just always his male parts. And anyways, he would basically do stuff to me while I would pretend to be dead. And it quite easy. The interesting thing is it was very easy for me to play dead, to not have any emotion at all. It was one of the easiest gigs for me to do and one of the highest paying ones. But there was something in my spirit that always was like just so wrong. I was just crying inside that I didn't want to do it. And you could tell on my face. I think one weekend we were shooting and it was like the last day and I just wanted to cry. I just wanted to be over. Because this one time I was actually crucified in one of these clips. And they were beating me, flogging me. I was naked, crucified, and they were beating me, flogging me in this. And I was just, eventually until I died, right? Like that was the gist of it. Completely gross, completely just blasphemous. And I didn't know God, I didn't know Jesus at this time, but it still felt wrong, in my moral sense of my spirit, which I didn't know I had at the time. It was just yelling at me that this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this. That moral thing, that moral code that God's built into us. But I still kind of did it also. So I was really into all kinds of really nasty perversion, not because I liked it, but it's because I wanted approval. And I kind of thought that my husband liked it, so that was kind of, I associated the sex with being loved because that's, all I saw with my mom and stuff. So, and that's quite a common problem with females in this day and age and why they end up being so promiscuous. Anyway, I was doing that kind of stuff. So take that into account. Basically I was into witchcraft, into the cult, praying to the Great White Brotherhood, totally chock full of demons, in all kinds of perversion, thinking that my life was completely fine, like there was nothing wrong with what I was doing at all. I was completely content with all that I believed in and all that I had, and one day in 2011, I'm doing laundry, but one day in 2011, I was doing my daily guided, well, not guided, it was just a meditation. I was just doing a simple meditation, and it ended up being my last meditation, the very last meditation that I ever did. So I was, here you go. Yeah, it's warm too. Aww. Yeah. So I was doing my very last guided meditation that I had ever done. I mean, I didn't know this was going to be my last one, but so in this meditation, it's done, yeah. Sorry, guys. So in this, yeah, it's warm now. That's what happens when we put it in the dryer. So, anyways, in the very last meditation that I did, I was, yeah, I was, huh? Here you go. So okay, hold on, guys. Sorry, everybody. Okay, my 3-year-old. All right. So this meditation, I was on the beach, and the sand was completely white, and it was weird because I couldn't see the sky. There was no blue sky. It was all just very hazy, like a fog, but yet it was like a jungle. Like, okay, so the beach was here, and it was like, it was like white sand, but on the edge of it was a complete lush and green jungle. And I don't know. I was just on this beach, and then I see this man walking up the beach and getting closer to me, and he's in a white robe. He's in a white robe and sandals, and I mean, it wasn't like how I expected Jesus to look, really. I mean, he definitely was darker skinned and heavier brow bone, darker hair. But anyways, but when he looked at me, his eyes were brilliant. I can't even to this day explain what color his eyes were. Yeah, like I can't tell you they were one color, because they weren't. They were brilliant. And it's like I knew immediately it was Jesus once I met his eyes. And even to this day, I still don't know if that was like really that, or if it was like really, I don't know how to explain that. Like I don't know if it was just one of, because basically in the type of beliefs that I had at the time, you could access master Jesus, right? There was different ascended masters that you could meet with, right? In meditation, one of them was Buddha, like Gandhi, or just like all the archangels you could even meet with, or like Saint Germain and all the different saints. It's so messed up, but anyway, but I had never quote unquote met with Master Jesus before in my meditation. So I knew immediately it was him. And it was weird because he was like communicating with me but not moving his mouth. And he told me to hold out my hands, and I did. And he handed me a smooth, hard river rock and put it in my hands. And at the time I was like, well, I don't know what to do with this. And he's like, in time you will. And then that was it. I came out of the meditation and was like, whoa, that's crazy. That's weird, right? What does that mean? I mean, to this day now I think about the scriptures of, I'll give you a heart of flesh from your heart of stone, So anyway, it was interesting because then not that day, but I think that week we met up in my, my metaphysical, psychic class. I don't know, that's what we kind of called it. It was just a bunch of people getting together and doing meditations and readings and stuff and trying to hone in on our gifts, right? And we would always share our meditations and share anything that we got on each other, like any kind of psychic things that would happen to us. And I shared my meditation that week, and everyone was so excited. And I remember my friend Lisa, she was just like, she's like, you saw Master Jesus. And it was the weirdest thing because all of a sudden I felt so irritated by the fact that they were calling him Master Jesus. Like he was one of the ascended masters, and I was just really irritated, but I couldn't pinpoint as to why or how or why this was happening to me. I was just like, this is weird. I don't know why I feel this way. I'm not sure. And I'll say that a bunch of, not a bunch of time, but I want to say like a couple months passed to where God really was trying to penetrate his word into my soul, into my spirit, just because then all of a sudden he would bring all kinds of Christians into my life, right? Speaking the word into my life. And a lot of times I took it very offensively because a lot of, I opened my chakra, I opened my third eye, and I remember I was like I got so defensive because I would find these people talking about scriptures and talking about familiar spirits and stuff like that, and I would get so defensive of it, but yet it wouldn't, I was like so offended by it, but yet it wouldn't go away. Like I couldn't make it go away, and it was so weird because then he started, really showing me different things, and I was like having these dreams, and then I was just so confused as to why this was happening. And then all of a sudden it was so weird, and this was an accumulative of time, so this was like weeks later, possibly even a month or so, maybe even 2 months from the time of the meditation. But I was pulling up into the driveway for our class, for our metaphysical witch class, and it hit me like that. Like God just like how he says with Apostle Paul, how he removes the scales from his eyes. It's like he removed the scales from my eyes at that exact moment that I had parked in that parking lot. And the first thing I said was, "You sneaky devil." I remember saying that because he saw me, he let me see all of my deception. And I was like, what? Like all of it. I saw all of it. And it was, let me just tell you that was the last time that I had attended that class. And that class was the day that we were going to make candles, put intention in it and make these candles for different things we wanted. And it was such an awkward class for me because all of a sudden I was like, this is all a lie. Everything I knew was a lie. And so anyways, I just was awakened at that moment. And then it was seriously, once I got that revelation, once he removed the scales from my eyes, once I could see clearly, all of a sudden I repented. And it was, being a part of the cults and any kind of the sex industry or anything like that, that was like one of the easiest things for me to repent of and just turn away from like that. It was just like, once I was saved, there was no turning back from it. And I was accepting Jesus as my Lord and Savior within days after that, after my eyes were opened. And glory be to God for all of that. That was just amazing because I was not seeking it per se. I was not I was, but I didn't know that I was. I was seeking for meaning in my life, and I just didn't understand what my purpose was. And so he's like, well, I'm going to show you what my purpose is for you. And so anyways, that was just an amazing testimony. And honestly, I used to be really, really, verbally and emotionally abusive towards my husband and towards people, my mom, anybody. When I would be in panic attacks, I had panic attacks for absolutely everything. I could never even leave my house. And because of that, my husband we had a really tough time in my marriage. My husband, by the grace of God, God has given me a husband that's very, very patient with these things. I mean, for 6 years, he was just putting up with me, just completely just degrading him and not wanting to be touched or comforted, or just very cold. And I'm still working through a lot of those things. I still have some struggles, when you're neglected and when you're emotionally abused, it takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of grace, and you have to rely on that grace so much more than yourself. And that's the hardest thing, because in this whole testimony, self-reliance is the biggest thing for me. And I want to do everything and control everything myself, and I can't. And that's the biggest thing that he's really trying to show me, that I can trust him, because I have a hard time trusting people in general. And I mean, since then, he has so many other testimonies, like I was saying in the beginning of this. I could go on for so long, but it's already been 40 minutes. And I just wanted to show you, share with you my testimony of how far I've come, because I used to not be able to even like leave my house, right? And I never would leave my house without any kind of medication. I would have to take I was prescribed Xanax. I would take Xanax all the time. And I never wanted to have kids, because kids were unpredictable. Kids needed nurturing, and that's not something I knew how to do. And once I got pregnant really pretty quickly after I was saved, and God, he told me every time I would be pregnant, because of the fact that I was so fearful of it. And that's his grace right there. That's his grace. And his grace endures forever. And that's the truth, because it's written in the word. And so that's the truth. And I've seen that grace time and 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 time again, to the point where there's not one person that can convince me that God is not real. So ultimately, in my life, I went from like an atheist to a witch to agnostic to all of a sudden Jesus showing up in a meditation and changing my life. So I know that he was behind that whole thing. Oh, sorry. My dog. But anyways, so that's my testimony of how I was saved and everything. And I was into, witchcraft galore, like chakras, meditation, all about The Secret. I don't know if you've heard of The Secret on Oprah and all that stuff, but all about that stuff. Past life regressions, tarot card readings, angel card readings, just all kinds of stuff I was into. And again, I thought that was the right way. I wasn't seeking otherwise, but yet I was. And so God really opened my eyes to his truth. And so I really hope you've enjoyed my testimony. Like I said, it's just one of many. And he's not done yet, guys. He's not done yet. 2011, it's 2011 that all happened to me, since I was saved and came to the knowledge of the Messiah. And man, the stuff that he's done, and especially in the last like 2 years, he's really been, it's been the last 2 years that it's been really like, okay, you've learned all this stuff, you've learned my word, now it's time to put it into action. And that part is the hardest part. We're all about doing and learn, not all about doing, but we're all about learning. Like, I could be ever learning, but it's all about doing too. We need to be doing. And when it actually comes to practicing doing, whew, it's uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. But you know what? I still have hope. Like, even through all those trials, even through the trials, I have hope now. And I have hope for the testimony that's still to come. I've come so far in mental illness, and he's got even further for me to go. I'm still here, and as long as I'm still here, alive, breathing in the air that's in my lungs, that's his breath, that's his Holy Spirit, then I got to do his will. But sometimes we have to move aside our will for his, and that can be pretty tough. And humbling needs to take place. And what's a better way to be humbled than by tests and trials, to see where you're going to turn? Are you going to try to turn to yourself? Are you going to try to rely on other people? Or are you going to go straight to him? He is our first line of defense, not our last. Not our last. And that's what, I've had to learn it. Sometimes the hard way. A lot of times I say that. I'm like, I don't want to go around this mountain again. A lot of times we want to say these Israelites, like, they had to go around in this wilderness for 40 years because they just didn't learn. But I'm like, I'm no better. I'm no better. I have to do the same trials, the same tests over and over and over again many times. And I'm like, okay, God, But I don't get discouraged anymore. If I fail a test, I say, what can I learn from this ultimately? What can we do next time? Because I know there's going to be a next time. Probably not the same exact situation, but something close, because Satan likes to use the same motives. And it's usually, for me, fear. And it is for a lot of people. So anyways, I'm going on, and this is 45 minutes long. I could go on and talk all night about this. I could talk about, my other testimonies and things like that. But I'm going to go ahead and cut this off right now. I hope you're blessed by this. I hope that someone's encouraged by this. And I'm just so thankful for God, for you, for everyone that's listening to this. What? Okay, you don't want it now? Okay. Oh, yeah, he's... Okay. Anyways, so just God bless all of you, and just keep doing what you're doing, and keep studying, keep on your spiritual disciplines, but make sure you're doing your spiritual disciplines in love too. Make sure that's first and foremost, because it's written in His Word. I can prophesy, I can speak in tongues, I can move mountains with my faith, but if I don't have love, I'm nothing. So be blessed with this and be encouraged. Thanks.